You reach for your phone without thinking. You pick up a pen, a key, a spoon, and your hand already knows what to do before your brain catches up. It feels automatic. It feels like nothing. But the real answer is far stranger. That small unconscious reach, the one you make 100 times a day, is the last link in a chain that stretches back 3 million years. Before language, before fire, before the word human even meant anything. It starts on a dry riverbed in northern Kenya, with a creature that was not yet us, holding a rock and doing something no living thing on Earth had ever done before. Who was it? Nobody knows their name, obviously. Nobody knows their face. But in 2011, a team led by the geologist Sonia Harmond and the archaeologist Jason Lewis got lost while surveying near Lake Turkana. They took a wrong turn. They ended up in a place called Lomekwi, and there, sitting in the dirt, were stones that looked wrong for their surroundings. Too sharp, too deliberate, too obviously shaped by something with intent. They dated the site. The results didn't make sense at first. The tools were 3.3 million years old. That number matters more than it sounds like it should, because the genus Homo, the branch that eventually leads to you, didn't exist yet. Homo habilis, the so-called handyman, the species that was supposed to hold the title of first toolmaker for almost a century, wouldn't show up for another 800,000 years. Whoever cracked those stones at Lomekwi wasn't human. Not even close. They were something more like Australopithecus, or possibly Kenyanthropus platyops, a strange side branch of our family tree with a flat face and a brain barely a third the size of yours. Sit with that for a second. A creature with a brain smaller than a chimpanzee's did something that changed the direction of an entire lineage. Not because it was smart in the way we usually mean smart. Because it had a problem, and a rock. Now chimpanzees use tools too. Jane Goodall proved that decades ago, watching them strip leaves off twigs to fish termites out of a mound. Some chimp populations even use stones to crack nuts, choosing specific rocks and reusing them. So the Lomekwi discovery isn't about tool use appearing out of nowhere. It's about something more specific. Controlled stone napping, striking one rock against another at a precise angle to peel off a sharp flake. That is a different category of skill entirely. A chimp cracking a nut is using an object as it already exists. A hominin at Lomekwi was changing the object, reshaping it into something the natural world had never produced on its own. The technique itself is called percussion flaking. You take a stone, a core, and you strike it at a precise angle with another stone, a hammerstone. Not randomly. Not the way an animal bangs things together out of frustration. There's a physics to it. Hit the wrong angle, and the stone just crumbles into dust. Hit it right, and a thin, sharp flake splits away with an edge sharper than anything nature makes on its own. Nature makes teeth. Nature makes claws. Nature does not make blades. That took a mind that could hold cause and effect together, even a primitive one. Strike here, get this. Do it again, and it works again. Do it differently, and it fails. That's not instinct. That's the first flicker of something else. Researchers Kathy Schick and Nicholas Toth, who spent decades at the Stone Age Institute actually relearning how to nap stone the way early hominins did, describe it less like invention and more like discovery. The Lomekwi toolmaker probably wasn't trying to invent technology. They were probably just trying to get to something. Marrow inside a bone, the soft inside of a tough plant. A problem with no solution using teeth and hands alone. So they solved it with a rock, and once that happened once, it could happen again. And it did. 800,000 years later, a different group of hominins, this time closer to what would become Homo habilis, were doing the same thing near a place called Gona in Ethiopia. The archaeologist Sileshi Semau uncovered thousands of these tools in the 1990s, so many so consistently made that they gave the whole style a name, Oldowan. Simple flakes and cores, nothing fancy by later standards, but revolutionary at the time, because now it wasn't an accident anymore. It was a tradition. Something was being taught, passed down, copied. Think about what that requires, not just the idea of a tool. The idea of showing someone else how to make one. That's a kind of teaching, a kind of memory that outlives a single lifetime. By the time you get to roughly 1.7 million years ago, the tools change again. Simple flakes give way to something called Acheulean hand axes, symmetrical, teardrop-shaped tools that took real planning to produce. You couldn't stumble into a hand axe. You had to see the finished shape in your mind before the first strike ever landed. That's a different kind of cognition than Lomekwi. That's foresight. Not every researcher agrees on what Lomekwi actually proves, and that's worth knowing too. Some archaeologists have pushed back, arguing that a handful of unusually shaped rocks isn't enough to declare an entirely new chapter of human history. Maybe, they say, natural forces broke those stones. A rock tumbling down a slope. Another rock crushed under the weight of a landslide. Geology can fracture stone in ways that sometimes mimic intentional flaking, but the counter-argument is hard to ignore. The flake scars at Lomekwi follow a repeated directional pattern. The same angle, the same technique over and over, on multiple stones at the same location. Random geological accidents don't usually repeat themselves with that kind of consistency. Consistency is the signature of a mind, even a small one, doing the same thing on purpose because it worked the first time. Here's where it gets stranger. For most of the 20th century, the assumption ran one direction. Bigger brains came first. Then, once you were smart enough, you invented tools. Intelligence causes technology. That was the story, and it made intuitive sense because it flatters us. It says our minds built our tools, but Lomekwi flips that. A brain a third the size of yours was already doing it. Which means the arrow might point the other way. Rick Potts, who directs the Human Origins program at the Smithsonian, has spent years arguing that our lineage's defining trait wasn't a big brain waiting to be used. It was adaptability, variability, the ability to respond to a constantly shifting environment by inventing new solutions on the fly. Tool use wasn't a symptom of intelligence. It might have been a cause of it. Picture what that pressure looks like across a few million years. A creature that can crack open a bone gets access to marrow, dense in fat and calories, food its competitors physically cannot reach. That creature survives leaner seasons a little better. It has slightly more energy to spare, and in a body, spare energy has to go somewhere. Some of it goes to the brain, which is metabolically expensive tissue, expensive enough that most animals can't afford much of it. So the tool doesn't just solve a meal. It slowly, generation after generation, funds the very thing we think of as making us human. You didn't get a big brain and then invent the hammer. The hammer might have helped build the brain. Does that unsettle you a little? It should, because it means the story of human intelligence isn't really a story about thinking our way to greatness. It's a story about hands, about friction, about a creature with modest cognitive equipment, standing on a riverbed, hitting rock against rock again and again, until something sharp came out. There's a name for this kind of shift in how researchers think about it. Some call it embodied cognition, the idea that intelligence doesn't just happen inside a skull and then get expressed through the body. It happens through the body, through doing, through trial, error, and repetition, with the world pushing back and teaching you something your brain alone never could. You already know this, even if you've never said it that way. Think about the last time you actually learned to do something with your hands. Tie a specific knot. Chop vegetables fast without watching your fingers. Type without looking at the keys. Nobody explained that skill into your brain. Your hands learned it by doing it wrong over and over until they stopped. That loop, hands failing, hands adjusting, hands succeeding, is 3 million years old. It didn't start with you. It started at Lomekwi. And it isn't only a mental inheritance, it's a physical one. Look at your own hand. Your thumb sits low and rotates in a way that lets it press firmly against each fingertip. A grip strong enough to strike stone against stone without your hand collapsing on impact. Chimpanzees don't have that same precision grip. Their thumbs are shorter, weaker, less opposable. Somewhere across those millions of years, the very shape of the human hand was being pulled, generation after generation, toward a form that could grip a hammerstone more effectively. The tool didn't just change what our ancestors could do. It changed what their bodies became. Think about that the next time you thread a needle, or turn a key, or hold a pen steady enough to write your name. That precision isn't random. It's inherited machinery, shaped by millions of years of hands meeting stone. Here's the part that should really stop you. We tend to imagine early toolmaking as some kind of triumphant leap forward. Music swelling, a creature standing tall holding a tool up to the sun. That is not what it was. It was almost certainly born out of desperation. Climate records from that period in East Africa show a landscape in flux, forests shrinking, grasslands spreading, food sources shifting unpredictably. The Lomekwi toolmaker probably wasn't innovating out of curiosity. They were probably hungry. Their old strategies, the ones that had worked for their ancestors, weren't working anymore, and instead of dying out, they picked up a rock. That is the actual origin of human technology. Not genius, not vision. Adaptation under pressure, from a creature that had run out of easier options. What does that tell you about where real invention usually comes from? Not comfort, not surplus, scarcity, and the refusal to accept it. It's worth noticing how often that pattern repeats all the way through history. Fire wasn't tamed by a species with nothing to worry about. Agriculture wasn't invented by people who already had plenty to eat. Almost every major leap sits downstream of some version of the same sentence. This isn't working anymore, and I have to find another way. Comfort rarely invents anything. It doesn't need to. Pressure invents. Pressure always has. You can trace a straight, unbroken line from that moment to right now. Stone flakes became hand axes. Hand axes became spears. Spears became agriculture. Agriculture became writing. Writing became cities. Cities became the phone sitting in your pocket right now, the one you reached for without thinking a few minutes ago. Every piece of technology you've ever touched, every app, every engine, every blade, is a direct descendant of a creature solving a problem. It didn't have the biology to solve any other way. You are, in a very real sense, still doing what they did. You just don't call it toolmaking anymore. You call it a workaround, a hack, a better way to get something done. But the impulse is identical. Face a limit. Look at what's around you. Combine it into something new. Don't wait for your body to evolve a solution. Build one instead. Think about the last time you were stuck on a problem with no obvious fix, and you improvised something out of whatever was nearby. A jammed drawer forced open with a butter knife. A phone propped up against a water bottle to watch a video hands-free. A wire bent into a hook to fish something out from under the couch. Small forgettable moments, but they run on the exact same circuitry as Lomekwi. Limit, object, reshape, solve. That's the real inheritance, not the tool itself. The refusal to stay stuck. Every industry you can name is just a more elaborate version of that riverbed. Engineers hitting a design wall and reshaping the constraint instead of accepting it. A software developer stuck on a bug at 2 a.m, trying one more approach because the first 9 failed. A parent improvising dinner out of whatever's left in the fridge because the plan fell through. None of it looks like Lomekwi on the surface. All of it runs on the same underlying instinct. Look at the problem. Look at what's around you. Don't wait. Build something. Even the way you learn a new skill today echoes that ancient transmission at Gona, where technique passed from one hand to another without a single word being necessary. Watch someone tie a fishing knot once, and your hands can often repeat it before your brain could ever explain the steps out loud. That's not coincidence. That's the same mechanism, teaching through doing, that let older one toolmaking spread across an entire region 1,000,000 years before anyone could write it down. There's something almost humbling in knowing that this trait, the one we consider most distinctly human, our cleverness, our engineering, our endless drive to build better things, started with a creature that wasn't clever by any modern measure. It didn't have language. It didn't have a plan. It had a problem, 2 rocks, and enough persistence to keep striking until something worked. Maybe that's the actual definition worth holding on to. Not intelligence as some fixed trait you either have or don't. Intelligence as a behavior, as a willingness to keep hitting the stone, even when the first 10 attempts shatter into nothing useful. As the decision to try an 11th time. When Harmond and Lewis published their findings in Nature in 2015, it didn't just add a new artifact to a museum case. It rewrote the opening page of the human story. For decades, textbooks had drawn a clean, comfortable line. Bigger brain, then better tools, then modern humans in that order, moving upward like a staircase. Lomekwi broke the staircase. It suggested the climb was messier, less linear, driven less by some inevitable march toward genius, and more by ordinary creatures under ordinary pressure, doing whatever it took to eat that day. That's a harder story to put in a textbook. It's a truer one. It also means the timeline you may have learned in school, humans appearing, then figuring out tools somewhere along the way, has the order almost backwards. Toolmaking didn't wait for humanity to arrive. Toolmaking helped build the road humanity walked in on. How many times do you give up on something after the first 2 or 3 failed attempts? Be honest. The Lomekwi toolmaker didn't have that option. Failure just meant hunger lasted another day. So they kept striking. There's no monument at Lomekwi, no statue, no plaque, nothing that marks it the way we mark other turning points in history. Just a dry stretch of land in Kenya, some scattered stones in a research collection, and a date that keeps getting cited in papers most people will never read. That's usually how the biggest turning points work. They don't announce themselves. They just quietly change what's possible for everything that comes after, and the world moves on without noticing the exact moment it happened. You'll never know their face. You'll never know if they understood even a little what they'd just done. Probably not. They were almost certainly just hungry, and tired of being hungry and unwilling to stay that way. Next time you pick something up without thinking, a pen, a phone, a set of keys, notice it. Actually notice it. Your hand closing around an object, shaping it to a purpose that nature never gave it. That gesture is not new. It is not really even yours. It belongs to a lineage stretching back further than language, further than fire, further than the word human itself. You reach for your phone without thinking, and somewhere behind that reach, 3 million years deep, something without a name, without our brain, without our words, is still the reason your hand knows exactly what to do. It never really stopped reaching. It just handed the reach down to you.